The Boston Bruins and the rest of the NHL are on a break for the Winter Olympics in Sochi. Can the black and gold carry the momentum from their last 10 games into the upcoming schedule after not playing for nearly 2.5 weeks? Thanks for joining us today on Bruins Daily TV. Erika Lee alongside Tim Rosenthal here at Studio 73 at Suffolk University. We've got so much to talk about even with the Bruins on a break.
Yeah, we do, and we got a lot of Olympic hockey that we'll be discussing next week. I know you and I talked about that before the show, and we even caught a couple of updates, didn't we?
We did. So much to discuss. We've seen the Bruins overcome injuries at the midseason point. We've seen them overcome the loss of Zdeno Chara for 2 games heading into this break, obviously taking 1 out of 2 of those 2 games. Caused a little bit of controversy, but the Bruins still came out of it okay.
Yeah, and they look good in both games, first off, especially against the St. Louis Blues, who's right now one of the top teams in the Western Conference. I think only a few points behind Anaheim entering the Olympic break. But they look very good. Tuukka looked pretty sharp, last goal aside, and they didn't really have that many breakdowns aside from the overtime winner, and they played their hearts out that game. There wasn't much else you can ask for from that. Sure, you could have been disappointed with the result, but they had a great effort in St. Louis, and then that momentum carried into Saturday where they just had a smoke show and vetoed the Ottawa Senators.
They sure did, and Chad Johnson picks up another win in the net for Tuukka, while Tuukka took off for Sochi to go play for Finland, which he'll be starting tonight, I believe.
Yes, I believe he is starting for Finland this week in their first game, and well-deserved. He might even start their second game. There's a lot of talk about that, even with Antti Niemi as one of the other goaltenders, and he's had Stanley Cup final experience too when he was with the Blackhawks and a Western Conference final appearance with the Sharks not too long ago. So that would be an interesting goaltending controversy going forward for this next week and a half, I think.
We'll have to see what happens. Now, the big issue here, the Bruins have just 1 regulation loss in their last 10 games. They're 7-1-2. This team is absolutely on fire, leading the Atlantic with 78 points, just behind Pittsburgh in the East, who leads with 83 points. What's working well, and how can they take this momentum through this 2.5 week break? They've got a rigorous schedule coming up heading into March in the last week of February.
Yeah, 17 games in 31 days in March, and they're really going to be put to a test. So them going 7-1-2, 8-1-2 even in their last stretch before the Olympic break was really important against good opponents too. You had that overtime loss to Chicago, the overtime loss to St. Louis, and then lost to the Habs, and that was about it from this team. They looked pretty good. They beat the teams who they should have beaten, and they're getting contributions from all 4 lines, offensively, defensively. The young guys are really stepping up. Matt Barkowski, Dougie Hamilton, Torrey Krug, obviously, in the absence of Dennis Seidenberg. So the only issue I have, and we'll talk about this in a little bit, is the penalty kill. But other than that, I think as long as they continue to get goals from all 4 lines, and as long as they're playing solid defensively, and I'm sure Tuukka's going to break out this mini slump eventually as well.
I'm sure. Tuukka's somebody we're going to talk about right now, a bright spot for the Bees this season. He posted his 5th shutout of the season back on February 1st against Edmonton. He leads the NHL in shutouts this season, ranking 7th in the NHL with a goals against average just over 2. He's 4th in save percentage and wins. Save percentage is at .928, and he's got 25 wins on the season.
Yeah, and this comes after a month where he wasn't as good, as sharp. This also comes after the Habs game where he was pulled in the middle of the second period and obviously didn't get much of an explanation from Claude Julien afterwards. So at the same time, I could see why he didn't want to throw his goaltender under a bus for what he's done all season long, and he's done a very good job for the Bruins. And I think the stretch of games where he had October, November, and December really outweigh what he did in January and even a little bit of February too. But I expect Tuukka to be sharp. I know there's the concern of him starting the majority of the games for a first time in his career. He hasn't even started 50 games at all during his career, and I think he's close to that right now, between 45 or 46 starts, I believe. That might be a concern down the road, but I don't see that being a concern right now. I think he's handling the workload nicely, and when Chad Johnson has come in, he's looked pretty good as well.
Absolutely. Another guy we can brag about a little bit, of course, is the workhorse that is Patrice Bergeron, who entered the break second in faceoff percentage at nearly 60%. Bergie also leads the league with 733 faceoff wins, which is 24 more than the guy in second place, who just so happens to be Sidney Crosby.
He's still one of the best two-way forwards in the league, I believe, and he's a prime candidate again to win the Selke Trophy. He's contributing a little more offensively recently, especially with the addition of Riley Smith to that line, and with Brad Marchand being red hot. There's no denying that he's still a great two-way player. He might be even having his best season yet, as far as I'm concerned.
Definitely a bright spot for the Bees. Now, on the flip side, we can't fail to mention what isn't working well for the black and gold right now. Big concern, obviously, is the penalty kill.
Yes, since Dennis Seidenberg's injury, they've gone from a top 5 team, which at one point killed 24 or 25 penalties in a row during November, and now they're in the middle of the pack. I think Seidenberg's absence is really hurting them. They've gotten a lot better recently. They held the Blues scoreless on the power play, and I think they held the Sens off the scoreboard on the power play as well. So the last 2 games is something to build on, but they really need to work on that. I know Pierre Chiarelli, he said publicly he's looking at a defenseman come trade deadline time, which might be, looking at the current roster, as their only need right now. I know we're going to talk about that in our second segment, so let's just smoothly segue into that.
All right. Well, we'll get back to that in just a few. We're going to take a quick break here, and when we come back, we're going to answer your questions on Bruins Daily TV. Welcome back to Bruins Daily TV. Erika Lee here alongside Tim Rosenthal, and now it's time for us to take some of your questions. Every other week here on Bruins Daily TV, Tim and I will solicit your most burning Bruins questions via our Twitter and Facebook accounts. So make sure you're following us on Twitter at Bruins Daily, @_Tim Rosenthal, and @_Erika Lee. You can also find Bruins Daily on Facebook as well. Just reply to our tweet asking for your questions on Mondays using the hashtag BDTV, and your question could be featured right here on Bruins Daily TV. So our first question this week comes from @JWBruin4 on Twitter, and he wants to know, although the Bruins defense has been doing really well with all of the talent from Providence, should the Bees shop for a stay-at-home defenseman come the trade deadline?
Yes, absolutely. I think they need another top 4 guy. The guys in Providence are the young guys, even the guys from Providence have done real well this year. You look at Mac Bartkowski progressing into his own. You look at Dougie Hamilton making strides. Torrey Krug has picked up right where he left off in the playoffs. But you still need that veteran to play alongside Zdeno Chara or Johnny Boychuk come playoff time. So I definitely think that's Peter Chiarelli's main target at the trade deadline, is a stay-at-home guy.
And I know there are a couple options on the table for that as well.
Yes, for sure. I think we have another question surrounding that.
You're right. So similarly, our second question comes from Sean Burwell on Facebook, and Sean wants to know which defenseman the Bruins should court with the trade deadline approaching in order to fill the hole left by Dennis Seidenberg.
Unfortunately, this year, the market is so thin on defensemen because you don't have that many prolific defensemen on the market going into the offseason. And you have another issue is if they want to acquire a defenseman, maybe they have to acquire a hefty contract that goes with it. But the 2 names that are coming up often in trade rumor talks are Dan Girardi and McDonald. Girardi for the Rangers, we saw him last year during the playoffs. I think he's a really solid defenseman, one of the most underrated defensemen in the league. And would they be willing to take his contract as a rental, though, for the last few months? Because he is one of those unrestricted free agents at the end of the year. A very solid 2-way guy. Could play with Chara easily, I think, if he came here. But the Rangers are also in a playoff hunt, so that's another concern. And Andrew McDonald, not as much playoff experience as Girardi. He'd be a solid option, but I don't think he's a type of top 2 defenseman that they're looking for to play with Chara. But I think he'd easily be serviceable with Johnny Boychuk as well. So maybe they look at him if the asking price is too much for Girardi.
All right, so we'll have to see what Peter Chiarelli does. Our last question comes from Joe Mason on Facebook. Joe is from Maine, and he finally got to his first Bruins game on Saturday night. He got to see the Bees beat up on the Sens, and Joe sat in section 314. So Tim, Joe would like to know if we were able to see him from our seats in the press box.
First off, Joe, I hope you enjoyed the experience. Bruins games, but whether you're a media member or a fan, it's very fun to attend. Unfortunately, from my view, though, as you can see from the picture we have, it's very high up. And while you get to see a lot of the play develop above the ice, we can't really see anything. Everyone looks like ants down there. So unfortunately, we did not see you there, but maybe give a shout out to us next time. And maybe our studio manager can put him on TV. I don't know.
Maybe. It's very possible. Gotta let us know. But yeah, we can't see anything from level 9, unfortunately, Joe. Sorry about that. Well, that's going to do it for us today. For Tim Rosenthal and the crew here at Studio 73, I'm Erika Lee, and we'll catch you next time on Bruins Daily TV.
We belong together. We stand proud and true. Remember when I said that I'd